You know, a thought that I had while I was watching this movie is, wow, it's so interesting how this movie has such an emphasis on dinosaurs and fossils and evolution. And it just got me thinking, I wonder how much this took influence from Jurassic Park. And then I looked at it and I realized, wait a minute, this came out in 1993, the same year as Jurassic Park. And not only that, this movie actually came out 2 weeks before Jurassic Park. This was released May 28th, 93. Jurassic Park was released June 11th, 93. So I'm like, what? I mean, granted, the Jurassic Park book had released like 3 years prior, and it was a massively successful book and a bestseller. But still, the point stands. Like, what's going on here? uh. Hey everyone, I'm Ben, your underground conductor, and welcome to Underground Cinema. Now this week, in order to prepare for the sequel to what is the highest grossing video game adaptation of all time, I thought it'd be fun to revisit Nintendo's first stab at adapting their mascot to the big screen. So today, I will be revisiting the hellscape that was the 1990s and talking about Super Mario Bros. From 1993. Which, funny enough, I think is actually the first video game adaptation I've ever reviewed. Which, yeah, that's fun. Now, this is going to be an interesting review for me, because this is a movie that I'd never seen before now, but is also a movie I feel like I've always known about. Ever since I was a kid, I'd always heard stories of this mythical live-action adaptation of Super Mario Bros. And obviously, like a lot of kids growing up, I was a huge fan of Mario and Nintendo. I remember I would play the games all the time when I was a kid. I would always bust out like my Nintendo DS to play Super Mario either like at school or at the Boys and Girls Club. So suffice to say, it was a pretty big part of my life. And yet, despite it being a relatively big part of my life, I never saw this movie. And the reason I never saw this movie until now is quite simple. It's because I had heard my entire life that this movie was terrible. I mean, to be fair, this movie technically is the first ever video game film adaptation ever released in the United States. Adapting a property like this was basically a shot in the dark. But as it stands, this movie was basically the prime example of how video game adaptations don't work. And they continued not to work up until only a few short years ago. I mean, when I was growing up, there were basically no good video game adaptations that existed, and that was primarily due to the work of people like Dr. Uwe Boll. But it also has to do fundamentally with how video games are different, narratively, than film. And it doesn't really seem like the industry truly figured out how to make good adaptations of that sort of source material until like maybe 2019-ish. Up until that point, video game adaptations just always had a reputation of being bad, and this movie was evidently no different. So I never sought it out. But we're in a new era now. Video game adaptations are good now. The last Mario movie was pretty solid. Not great, but not terrible. So I sat down and I thought about it and said, you know what? Why not revisit the original Mario movie? Its reputation has somewhat improved over the years, probably due to nostalgia. And really, at the end of the day, how bad could it be? So, with that all in mind, you might be asking yourself, what happens in Super Mario Bros.? Well, the movie actually has quite an interesting stylistic opening. We get an 8-bit recreation of the Mesozoic era, with narration explaining to us the mechanics of the world that we're living in. Then, as the 8-bit visuals transition back into live action, we see the meteorite strike the Earth, killing all the dinosaurs, and leading to the dimensional rift that exists in the narrative of this world. And I really like this stylistic introduction, because even though this movie doesn't really have a lot of strong connections to video game culture, it's nice to see that it at least pays homage to the thing that inspired it. Moving on from that, we transition into a prologue where it shows a woman dropping off an egg at a church. We then see that the egg hatches, and what appears to be a human baby pops out of it. Which does raise a lot of questions, but actually kind of makes sense as the film goes on. We then fast forward 20 years later, and that's where we actually properly meet our three central characters. Those characters being Princess Daisy, played by Samantha Mathis, Luigi Mario, played by John Leguizamo, and Mario, played by Bob Hoskins. And yes, those are their actual names. Luigi Mario and Mario. Which, that's just so hilarious. Like, I don't know why they did that, but I'm glad they did. It's so funny. Anyway, we get introduced to our main characters in their everyday lives. We see that the Mario brothers work as plumbers who are struggling to keep up with the competition as most of their jobs get stolen by a larger company owned by a man named Mr. Scapelli. Meanwhile, Princess Daisy appears to work as an archaeology student, and she's heading up a dig in Brooklyn, as there's apparently dinosaur fossils in Brooklyn, but her excavation is being threatened by Mr. Scapelli. Unsurprisingly, our three central characters come to get to know each other, as Luigi immediately develops a crush on Daisy, and the two of them end up going on a double date with Mario and his girlfriend Daniela. The date goes pretty well between the four of them, but unfortunately ends in tragedy, as both Daniela and Daisy are kidnapped by two men named Iggy and Spike. Iggy and Spike then take both women through what appears to be some sort of dimensional portal, and this prompts Luigi and Mario to follow them. Luigi and Mario end up getting spat out in a parallel version of New York. And as they're wandering around trying to orient themselves in this new world, that's when we come to meet the villain in this movie and learn his motivation. You see, the villain, King Koopa, or as Gen Zers know him, Bowser, is tired of living in this segregated dimension. As mentioned, 65 million years ago when the meteor hit, it created this dimensional rift, which resulted in humans evolving differently in different dimensions. In our world, mammals evolved into the dominant species, meanwhile in their world, reptiles evolved. And Koopa's world has used up most of its resources. So King Koopa wants to expand his fascistic empire into our world and start consuming our resources. And the way he plans to do that is to use a piece of a meteorite that Princess Daisy had with her, and reunite it with the ancient meteor that created this rift to begin with. That way their worlds can merge together. As the film goes on, the plot becomes a sort of MacGuffin hunt, as we get to see various aspects of this interesting dinosaur-evolved world, as both Koopa and the Mario brothers are both searching for this meteorite piece, and as the Mario brothers themselves are trying to find a way to rescue Princess Daisy. Eventually, the Mario brothers successfully do rescue Princess Daisy, but unfortunately, King Koopa's partner, Lena, has gone rogue, and she has taken the meteorite chunk herself, and has started the process of merging their worlds together. The film wraps up with this simultaneously climactic and comedic confrontation between King Koopa and Mario, which results in King Koopa getting de-evolved, blown up, and then de-evolved again. Which is actually a kind of nice comeuppance for his character, since what his character wanted to do was de-evolve humans once the worlds merged. That way his species could rule and not the primates. But in any case, both worlds are saved. The people of the dinosaur world are happy that King Koopa has been deposed. For some reason, the original king, Daisy's father, re-evolves himself from the fungus that he was the whole movie. And he's played by Lance Hendrickson, which is fun. And the Mario brothers give a heartfelt goodbye to Princess Daisy before going back to their own dimension. After some time passes, the Mario brothers have been recognized as the heroes of Brooklyn, as they are the ones who stopped King Koopa, and they've basically spearheaded a sort of natural merge between the worlds that is not physical but is more diplomatic. And as everything seems to be calming down, we then get Daisy's return, as she tells the Mario brothers that she needs their help once again for a new adventure. As cut to credits, that's how the movie ends, with a stinger for another movie that never happened. But yeah, that was the Super Mario Bros. Movie. And I don't know if this is going to be a hot take or not, but I'll say it anyway. This movie's actually good. Like, I'm serious. This movie's genuinely good. Like, I'm not joking, I'm not trolling, I'm not trying to be contrarian about this, because I know the film's reputation, obviously. This movie's good. Like, it's actually good. Like, I was really surprised as I was watching it, because when the movie started, I thought to myself, oh, this is fun, I like all the real-world stuff that we're getting here, but I figured that once it got to the mushroom world, the dinosaur world, that the movie would start to get stupid. And it does get stupid, but it gets stupid in a good way. Like, looking at this movie's completely indistinguishable from any other, like, schlock 90s action sci-fi movie that came out. Like, this movie, tonally and aesthetically, is exactly like something like Total Recall, or Demolition Man, or Judge Dredd. Like, it's a fun movie that doesn't take itself too seriously, has amazing production value, good pacing, great chemistry between the characters, good acting. Like, seriously, all the performances in this movie are great. The four standouts being, obviously, Dennis Hopper as King Koopa, Samantha Mathis as Princess Daisy, John Leguizamo as Luigi, and Bob Hoskins as Mario. All four of these actors make this movie. They do an outstanding job. Bob Hoskins especially is spectacular in this movie, really coming off as like this wise and experienced, somewhat grizzled and cynical mentor character, really helping to keep Luigi in line, but also accepting more ridiculous things that Luigi wants to do, like trusting the fungus. But when it comes to the more emotional, mature stuff, Hoskins is there to sell the character. Like at the end of the movie, when Luigi is leaving Princess Daisy and saying he wants to be with her, Mario tells him, hey, she likes you too, but like that's not important right now. What's important for her is to realize where she belongs and who she is, and if you love her, you'll understand that. It's really touching, and does not juxtapose harshly with the film at all, despite the fact that the film has a lighter comedic tone for most of its runtime. And it feels like an earned moment between the characters. But yeah, the overall characterization in this movie for the individual players is really solid. And it's remarkable to see them do so good, because apparently none of them liked making this movie. Like, at all. Like, Samantha Mathis more or less walked away with a relatively positive experience, because after this movie, people would recognize her as Princess Daisy, and she liked the fact that she left an impression on people's lives. But everyone else hated it. Like, Dennis Hopper thought this movie was so incredibly poorly managed by its directors, which were a husband and wife team, and he was stuck filming it for 17 weeks when he only signed on for 5. And even his son told him that he shouldn't have done this movie. And Dennis Hopper went on to tell his son that I did this so that you could have shoes to wear and, other things. And his son went on to tell him, I didn't need shoes that bad. Which is just wild. Meanwhile, Leguizamo and Hoskins fully hated every single day that they were on set and would get drunk not only before the shooting started, but also got drunk between their takes. And hearing that is just crazy because you cannot tell. Both of them, especially Hoskins, are taking their roles so seriously, and they're doing great. Like, I fully believe that they are Mario and Luigi. Like, they embody those characters so well. And even though it's kind of ridiculous, the idea that they're supposed to be brothers because they're so very clearly, 20 years apart, I do sense the familial relation between the two of them, because they have a great rapport with each other. And I also buy the romantic chemistry between Luigi and Daisy in this movie, as they're both equally awkward but in different ways. And I enjoy the characterization all around, as Koopa fulfills this archetype of a corporate, scene-chewing villain, but he's not entirely without depth, because, as mentioned, he wants to expand into our world, that way his world doesn't die. It isn't just so that he can be in charge of everything, even though he does want that, it's so that he can save his world as he knows it. He just can't contemplate the fact that he's the one ruining his world. And I also love the fact that King Koopa in this movie is a germaphobe. That's just a really fun detail. It relates really well to the world and how he doesn't trust fungus in this movie. And actor-wise, it also makes me think back to Dennis Hopper's previous role in the movie Blue Velvet, when he's just huffing on an oxygen mask every 5 minutes. Then you have Daisy, who was left behind at a church when she was a baby, and has spent her entire life looking for answers. And subconsciously, she got interested in paleontology and archaeology, because that's her heritage. She feels drawn to that, so it makes perfect sense why her character would end up at, a dig site. Then you have Mario and Luigi, who are exactly the way you would imagine those characters to be. Luigi being the young, energetic one who just wants to chase girls and not really do his job. Meanwhile, Mario's the more grizzled, like cynical, older guy, but he has a heart of gold. Like, the characterization for all four of these characters is just perfect. They nail it. Then you have the world building in this movie, which I really appreciate the fact that they put thought into it. Because it's very clear that when they were making this movie, they asked themselves, how can they make the world of Mario work? Because it's a world that doesn't make sense. Like, you look at Mario and Luigi on their face, like, they're two Italian plumbers who are from New York, who also save princesses and travel through pipes in a world full of, like, killer turtles and mushrooms. It doesn't make sense. So they sat down and they asked themselves, how can we make this concept make sense? Okay, the Mushroom Kingdom is like a parallel world that exists separately from ours. It's a world where lizards and reptiles evolved rather than primates evolving. And the villain has this sort of de-evolution technology to create his group of reptilian minions. That makes sense. That's a good concept, and I think it's well executed in this movie. And the fact that these worlds evolve parallel to each other, but are still recognizable enough that you could see the way that they connect, is also so incredibly interesting, and I think is very well communicated in the production design, costuming, and makeup. The fact that everything looks familiar, but slightly off, is a great way to visually communicate that this is a slightly different world. And I think it's also interesting in the way that it relates to the concept of convergent evolution. And for those of you who aren't familiar, convergent evolution is basically when you have two separate species who live in two different environments, but they evolve similar attributes and physical characteristics based on the similarities in those environments. And that is exactly what happened in this world. Even though reptiles and primates evolved separately, they both evolved to be pale-skinned and bipedal, and they both developed functional civilizations with cities, a bartering system, a political and corporate structure. Like, a lot of people would argue that this framing was simply done to save on budget, that way you wouldn't have to make up every single person to look like a dinosaur. But regardless of whether or not that was cost-saving, it's still interesting, and it shows how the filmmakers were making some sort of effort to make this world and concept make sense. And overall, this concept of convergent evolution also makes me think back to the concept of multiple discovery, which I have discussed before. But yeah, this movie's really fun, it's well acted, has good characters, good world building, and a good pace. But despite its many positive attributes, it does have problems, obviously. This movie is hated for a reason. For one thing, despite the fact that this movie is well-paced, the plot is a bit meandering, because as I referenced earlier, at a certain point the plot just becomes a MacGuffin chase. And there's nothing inherently wrong with structuring your narrative around getting a thing, especially in video games, specifically, where the object of a game is often to get a thing. But in this movie, it just feels kinda lazy, and like it was just done as an excuse to explore the various sets that they had built for this movie to showcase the world that they were also building through the concept. I'm not inherently against doing that, because as I said, I like the world of this movie, but it's kinda contrived. I also find this movie weirdly toothless in a lot of ways. Like I said, this movie is very similar to movies like Total Recall, Demolition Man, or Judge Dredd, both tonally and aesthetically. I mean, for God's sake, the music in this movie was done by Alan Silvestri, who also did the score for Judge Dredd. But something different between this movie and those movies is that those movies are bloody as all hell. This movie's not. And it's very obvious why this movie isn't bloody. It's because this movie was rated PG. It wasn't rated PG-13, which did exist at the time, and it wasn't rated R, it was rated PG. And this was clearly done as a conscious effort by the studio because, obviously, Mario is a kid's property. The Mario video games have been popular with kids for literally decades now. And when they were making this movie, they obviously wanted to have a low MPAA rating, that way they could get more kids into the theater. And I'm not against them doing that because this is a kid's property, but this very much feels like not a kid's movie. It's very dark aesthetically, it has kind of a grungy vibe, and also, despite the fact that this movie is weirdly toothless and bloodless, it's still sexual. Like, there's a lot of sexual tension in this movie. There's a lot of interesting sexual moments, like when Mario sticks his face in Bertha's chest. And almost all the women in this movie, for lack of better terms, they're wearing very slutty clothing. And I feel like that was an intentional costuming decision. So it's weird, the fact that this is a bloodless movie, but it still has a lot of sexual undertones in it. And what's even weirder is that typically in American film, it's the opposite. Like, typically, because America is very sexually prudish, when you have a movie that's like an action-adventure sort of thing, you heighten up the violence while minimizing the sexuality. Like, it is obviously the case that you'll get both in certain movies, but typically when you explore those things, you get a higher MPAA rating. And that's because, for a lot of different reasons, the MPAA is more biased against sex than they are against violence. I'd highly recommend checking out the documentary This Film Is Not Yet Rated if you want to learn more about that. But yeah, taking that into consideration, it's very interesting the fact that this film does have some sexual undertones while downplaying the violence. Because that's not normally the case. I mean, to quote Krusty the Clown, remember kids, TV violence is okay as long as you don't see a nipple. But yeah, that's another issue I have with the movie. Another issue I found is that the movie has kind of too many characters. I mean, you have the four central characters, obviously, of King Koopa, Daisy, Luigi, and Mario. But you also have a bunch of side characters like Iggy and Spike, who I love. But then you also introduce characters like Toad, who's a singer on the street. Or Yoshi, who's literally just a dinosaur. And then there's Koopa's partner Lena. And then there's Mario's girlfriend, Daniela, who is so much of an afterthought in this movie that Mario didn't even know she was kidnapped until the latter half of the film. And also literally kisses another woman, like halfway through the movie. They also set up a secondary antagonist in this movie in the form of Scapelli, who's referenced throughout the film. And they just kind of get rid of him at the end of the movie. Like, they turn him into a monkey and, like, that's that. Like, the way he was set up in the movie, it felt like he was, like, the real-world equivalent to King Koopa. And then the real Koopa shows up and is like, yeah, you're a monkey now. It's like, what the hell? And you also have the random cameo from Lance Hendrickson as the original king, who I feel like was supposed to be expanded upon in maybe a future movie, but that never happened. So, why? Like, I love Hendrickson, but why? Like, you have all of these characters who exist in the story, some of whom aren't even from the source material. And they're just meant to occupy narrative space. And on the one hand, while I do enjoy the fact that they make the world feel bigger, it also takes away from the focus of the central plot, which also ties into the issue of the plot being a bit meandering. It just feels like the movie wants to give you a diversion at every corner to distract you. And some of it is done for comedic purposes, like this is a funny movie. And it feels like it was made intentionally to be funny. I mean, if it wasn't meant to be funny, why the hell would they have pin-headed dinosaur minions with, like, giant bodies? Like, that's hilarious. But you can be funny without wasting time, and this movie does waste a bit of time. And it expends so much effort with all these diversions that it can't even allow you to sit and actually properly enjoy what you've been watching. And this even extends to the end of the movie where they literally have a stinger for another movie, which they never made. It just feels like the movie just tries so hard. And while I do admire a film that puts in the effort, because there's nothing I hate more than a lazy movie, it just feels like it expends so much effort trying to be the best version of itself that it can be, that it tilts over and becomes slightly exhausting. Like, stop being a tryhard, bro. Like, you got there. At a certain point, you can just say this is enough. But while we're on the subject of it trying so hard to be the best version of itself that it could be, this does bring me to my final issue with the movie, and I feel like this is probably the reason why this movie does have a bad reputation, and why people don't like it. Because even though I think that this is a genuinely good movie, it is not a good Mario adaptation. It's just not. Like, this movie takes the names and some of the iconography and characters from the concept of Super Mario, but outside of Mario and Luigi themselves, this does not feel like Super Mario. Like I said already, I like the inclusion of a lot of the characters in this movie, and like I said, I think Koopa and Daisy are both great characters in their own right, but no one outside of the main duo really feels like themselves. And I feel like that's really the big problem with this movie. I think that this is a good film, but it's not a good video game adaptation. It's not a good adaptation of the Mario property. And I think that's why people wholeheartedly rejected it for the most part. And it's so wild seeing how alien this movie is to the concept of Mario when you consider the fact that the Super Mario Bros. Movie that they released in 2023 feels like it borrows a lot of elements from this. Like the fact that Mario and Luigi are both struggling plumbers in Brooklyn that keep losing their business to another guy. The fact that they accidentally stumble across a portal to another world while they're doing a plumbing job in the sewer. The fact that the villain, King Koopa, wants to come to our world to take it over. Like, there's elements here that work and feel distinct to the Mario universe. But like I said, this is basically any other action sci-fi movie that came out in the 90s. And I feel like if this movie had like a different name and was part of a different property, it probably would have been received a lot better. But regardless of that, I like this movie. I think that this movie had a lot of work put into it. There's a lot of care and craftsmanship. There's a lot of little details that I love about this movie, like the fact that Luigi at the beginning of the movie presses his face against a pinboard, and that's clearly meant to foreshadow Daisy pressing her face against the rock portal when she's getting kidnapped. I love the fact that when the character Lena gets electrocuted, you can see a big white streak through her red hair, which I feel like is supposed to be a reference to the Bride of Frankenstein, since the bride is supposed to have red hair, and that's funny because that was the last movie I did a review for. I love the fact that King Koopa in this movie is supposed to be descended from Tyrannosaurus Rex, which makes sense, since he's often seen as the king of the dinosaurs, and King Koopa is the king of this world. I love the fact that everyone freaks out over Mario having the Bob-omb. It's just so funny. Oh, how does the Bob-omb look in real life? It's a little wind-up toy that apparently is owned by Reebok. Also, as a costuming decision, I love the fact that both Mario and Luigi get their classic red and green coveralls, instead of them both just getting blue ones, wearing red and green shirts respectively. It's more visually interesting, it distinguishes them more, and the fact that they're full coveralls really adds to the fact that they're both supposed to be plumbers, which they really commit to in this movie. Also, as a side note, I do love the fact that at the end of the movie, when Daisy's asking for their help, Mario's all like, okay, let's put on the belts here, let's get to work. It's just funny. The movie's funny. I also love how this movie has an after-credit scene, which I've never heard anyone talk about, where it's two Nintendo executives approaching Iggy and Spike, asking them if they want to make their own video game based on their adventures. Which I feel like probably would have been an ad to actually make a spin-off game about those two characters, but also it's just a funny way to end the movie. Especially since they appear to be just sitting in Mario and Luigi's apartment. It's just a funny tag to end the movie on. And I also love the fact that they try to make elements of the mechanics of the Mario games make sense. Like, how do they jump so high to crush people? Oh, well, here's some jump boots. And overall, I just love all the effort that they put into this movie. So despite the fact that a lot of the people who made this movie hated it, and also despite the fact that a lot of the fans of this concept also hated it, I think this movie has more going for it than it was initially given credit for. So with that all in mind, go check out Super Mario Bros. Maybe you'll be pleasantly surprised like I was. Or maybe you'll be completely turned off by it aesthetically and narratively. 90s schlock is not for everyone. But, what can I say? I love it. But yeah, in any case, that was my review of Super Mario Bros. I hope you all enjoyed it. Please feel free to subscribe if you're feeling generous. You can also follow me on Instagram and Letterboxd if you want to hear more of my film takes. I hope all of you enjoy the new Super Mario Bros. Movie, and thank God we're living in a renaissance of actually okay to good video game adaptations. And I will see you all later. It has been a while since I've had a new entry in my raffle. For those of you who may have forgotten, or for those of you who don't know, I am doing a cumulative giveaway for when I reach my first 500 subscribers. Basically, every few videos, I include a new piece of merchandise into a pot that slowly grows over time, and once I hit my first 500 subscribers, I'm going to randomly give that pot away to one lucky winner. This week, to celebrate Mario, I figured I'd give away Luigi! This is a Luigi pin that is from Universal Studios. Picked this up like 3 years ago when they opened up Super Mario World there. So, figured I could just give it away. It's a good pairing. Mario, Luigi, Luigi Mario, Mario Mario. Oh god, I am a cringe boy. Anyway, if you would like a chance to win this pin, as well as the other items that I've accumulated so far, all you have to do is subscribe and comment under this video. I will announce the winner when I reach my first 500 subscribers. So best of luck to you all, and remember to stay jumping on top of those Goombas.